Hi everyone, it's your girl Desiree and I'm back for another video. Make sure you stay tuned for the 3 reasons why sometimes we backslide in our journey in life. So stay tuned. So number one is that sometimes we go through transformation in life when we start a journey. And sometimes like there really is some change going on, like maybe for you it's substances and you're like, I'm going to go on a journey where I'm going to live a sober life. And you actually do see some great changes, but maybe because there are some other aspects of your life that need to be addressed as well. And those areas are not addressed. So it's easy to focus on like, okay, I'm going to focus on no drinking, this, no that. But then there may be some traumas or other things that may have been interwoven with the whole addiction process in general. And those things may not be addressed. Or maybe you're not spending as much time in those areas, or maybe you may not be ready to let certain things go. It could even be friends, for example. Yeah, that's a perfect one. So you may not want to let go of some friends that you have that are still going to the club, they always drinking, they always smoking, always doing all these different types of substances. And you know that these friends always influence you and they're not really helpful. So a part of that journey is also letting those friends go. That doesn't mean you never have to talk to them ever again, but you may have to distance yourself from people who obviously are going to try to encourage you to go do substances when you're trying to live a sober life. So yeah, you may see some great changes. Maybe you haven't had substances in a while, maybe even years, but now because you still hanging out with these type of people, it causes you to backslide now because you're still entertaining that. Or maybe you're watching certain type of shows or going to certain type of places, listening to certain type of music that is tempting you to get into substances, which is challenging because a lot of music and a lot of stuff these days, everything you watch, somebody's drinking, right? Somebody's smoking, somebody's talking about popping this and popping that in the song. So sometimes you may have to let go of a lot of things. And sometimes, like I said, we see change in our lives, but because there's certain things that we have not fully surrendered and let go of or minimized in our lives, this becomes a loophole for now us to be tempted to backslide. And then sometimes because we haven't fully transformed those other areas of our lives, now we find ourselves drinking again. We find ourselves smoking again. You find yourself, whatever it is that you are engaged in, you find yourself doing that again because you have not let go of those other parts in your life. Another example could be maybe somebody has, eating, for them is eating. They want to change their life. They want to eat healthy. They want to have a better overall health. And they did do well. They changed some of their diet. Maybe they're working out now. But maybe there's some psychological and emotional stuff that comes from their childhood or whatever that they haven't addressed. Maybe they're not going to therapy, or they're going, but they're just not fully engaged in it. So they're doing well and they have been making some changes, but because once again, there's a loophole area there that's not being addressed, and that becomes an open area now. And now those things that have not been fully transformed or fully addressed, it becomes like a temptation again, where now it's like, oh, I'm going to go to this food to fill this feeling of this grief or this trauma that I have experienced now. So when we're trying to go on a journey, we have to consider the cost, because a lot of times we don't consider the cost and we go into it and we get excited and we see change, we get zealous, we may even go on to share with other people, to encourage other people. But then as time goes on and we get further and further in it, like I said, because certain areas have not been addressed, these become loopholes and we find ourselves now dibbling, dabbling back into the same things that we have left behind because we have not fully been transformed. There has been some change, but we have not fully transformed. We have to address all areas that are attached to that thing that we're trying to move forward with. Whether it be friends, it could be people you're dating, it could be places you're going. Like I said, it could even be music. It could be so many things that we may not be ready to let go of, or we may be struggling with. We're not giving it enough attention. And these same things become loopholes now for now us to go back and backslide on things that we said we didn't want to go back to, or we wanted to transcend from that lifestyle. So we have to be very careful with making sure that, yeah, just because we see change and we should celebrate that, we need to make sure that we are addressing all areas that can be loopholes in our lives. The second reason that sometimes we're still in love with things that we have moved on from, quote unquote, moved on from. So you may be now living a sober life, for example. You maybe have done well. Like I mentioned in the first point, you have seen some change. There has been some transformation. But there's still some areas that have not been surrendered. There's still some loopholes there, and you still have a desire for these substances. And when you first start a journey, that can be normal. But when this time has passed and you still have a desire for this can be very unsafe, because now it's like day in and day out, you thinking about when you could possibly get a hold of that substance. And this becomes something, and then maybe you also, because you still have a love for it, you may be playing around with things that remind you of it. So whether that be friends who are doing that and they're tempting you, whether it be the music, whether it be, in this society, it's so challenging to stay away from things that are not going to tempt you when it comes to substances, because it's everywhere, especially alcohol. It's in the songs, it's in the billboards, it's on the TV, it's in the movies, it's everywhere. You go into professional settings, they have alcohol there. So it's very challenging for people who are truly trying to live a sober life, especially people who had major addictions. But we have to sometimes be honest with ourselves and say, have I truly overcome the desire for this? Because there's a difference between I have truly overcome it and I have no desire for it anymore. That doesn't mean that I'm never tempted ever again. But I don't have a desire for it. On most days, I'm not sitting around wondering what it would be like to get that feeling again. Because I have been transformed. My mind has been renewed. My spirit has been renewed. So I don't desire those things anymore. Once in a blue moon, a thought may come to my mind. I'm human. But I'm not sitting around 24/7 trying to hold myself, trying to not go grab a bottle. It's not, I've passed that point already. Same thing with relationships. Sometimes we could physically leave relationships, but we still hoping and wishing the person comes back, or we still checking their page, or we still thinking about them and wondering and having all these fantasies in our minds about them. It may not even be inappropriate things. It could just be, you're picturing yourself being with them again or laughing with them or whatever. But if I need to be moving on, and this is not somebody that I'm meant to go back to, then why am I sitting there checking their page or having these fantasies in my mind about us going on dates or doing things together? This is not healthy for me, because now I'm conjuring up all these things in my mind. The mind is very powerful. And all it takes is for that person to come back, or me to run into them, for me to be right back with this person again. Why? Because I still have the desire to be with them. So even though I may not be actively seeking them out, I may not even be still even talking to them, but my mind has not been renewed, my spirit has not been renewed. I still have a desire to look back at what it is that I left. It's kind of like Lot's wife. Yes, she was physically leaving out of the town, the city, but she looked back. She still had a connection with the past. Lot didn't look back. He was ready to be out of there. And they should have been left, to be honest. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had to leave the way that they did. But when you still have a desire to keep looking back, because you like thinking back about what you're going to leave behind, or you think about the memories or whatever, it's nothing wrong with remembering things. We have minds. We're humans. We can't forget everything. Unless you get a case of amnesia, you're going to remember memories. It is what it is. But to be dwelling on them and to be thinking about them and to fantasize about them, this is very dangerous, because then it can lead us going back to what it is that we were supposed to leave. Or even if we don't go back to that same exact person, or that same exact job, or that same exact situation, but we may go into another situation that's similar, because our hearts are still yearning for that same experience. So we have to get to the point where we have to ask, not only for strength to continue to be consistent on a journey, but to also to overcome those desires to want to go back. Those desires to want to still entertain things that we have been delivered from. Why am I still entertaining that? Why am I still thinking about that? If I know that the pain that it's caused me, or how it led me down a path that wasn't meant for me, and now I'm on a different path and I see the benefits of that, why would I want to go back to that job? Maybe there's some memories of some things there. Or maybe times are getting hard and I'm getting tempted and I'm struggling. I'm like, maybe I should just go back. And I'm getting weak. So these things happen. It's normal. But we have to be honest with ourselves, because if we're not honest with ourselves and we think, I'm strong, I'm fine, or, it's just a thought, and we're not really serious about it, we could find ourselves right back to where we left off. And sometimes we go back, it depends. Sometimes we could go back to where we left off. Sometimes we could even go back even further. We could find ourselves in an even worse situation than we left. Because, when you go back to something, sometimes it could be even worse than when you left to begin with. and then we really will regret it, right? Because they're like, man, like this is even worse than when I left the first time. So we have to be very careful, and it's a learning lesson. If you go back and you slip up, it's just something you would do once it's already done. But I'm saying, like, before that happens, we really have to be honest with ourselves, because sometimes we're not honest with ourselves. We say, oh no, I don't really miss that, or I don't really miss that person, I don't really miss that job. But you keep dwelling on it and thinking about it. You keep dibbling and dabbling and kind of playing with fire, almost like you kind of want it to pop back up again. So we have to be honest with ourselves about that. Yeah, it's important. And the third and final thing is basically that sometimes we backslide because we are not ready to let go of the current lifestyle that we are moving out of, or that we have already moved out of, and we are afraid of taking on this new life. Sometimes taking on the new life includes new friends. It includes, unfortunately, having to leave a romantic relationship, especially if it's not a marriage. If it's a marriage, that's another conversation for another day, because I don't advocate just upping and leaving a marriage just because you've changed your life and you don't feel like being in it anymore. But, in other situations, sometimes we have to leave. And it may not always be that you have to leave that friendship indefinitely. But sometimes for a season, or we may have to kind of take a step back from it, because the people that we are associated with, they are still in that same life that we're trying to leave. They're still engaging in the things that we're trying to let go of. In some cases, they may even be encouraging us and even influencing us. And that's not helpful, right? Because we're trying to go on a different path now. So it's one thing if the people that are in our lives, they are already on that new path that we're getting on, or they're ready to get on that path too, and y'all are kind of doing it together. Of course, it needs to be your own path, but I'm saying that it's different when y'all are on the same page, or they at least have the desire to say, you know what, I want to try this path too. But if they're not desired to do that, and they want to be on their own path, and you're trying to leave that behind, that's their choice. And we can't force people to be where they don't want to be. We have to allow people to be who they want to be. Just like they are in that path, we're not taking a different path. We want them to allow us to do that, right? Freedom of choice. We have to also give them freedom of choice to remain where we're trying to leave. And that can be scary, because that may mean that we may have to leave them behind. Sometimes that may mean that you have to leave the relationship altogether, or like I said, sometimes it doesn't have to be like that, but there may have to be some separation or some distance. And that's hard if those are friends that you're really close to. That's challenging if it's somebody that you're dating. It's challenging if it's family members. It may even be a job that you have to let go of because the morals and the values don't align with where you're trying to go now. Maybe it's time for you to move and uproot and go to a whole different state, maybe even a whole different country, because this is where you're being led. And there's a lot of stuff that you have to leave behind. And that can be really scary, especially when these are people that you've had all your life, or you've had them since you were a teenager, or this is a place that you've lived your whole life since you were growing up, or, maybe the last 10 or 15 years, or this is a job that you've been at and you have your retirement there, and you had this whole idea of, oh, I'm going to be at this job for this amount of time, and now you're being taken to a different path. And sometimes we don't want to let go of that. We want to hold on to those memories. We want to hold on to those experiences. We want to hold on to those people's, places, and things, because it can be scary to take on something new, especially if we have to go into places where we've never been before. So I'm speaking to myself as well, that sometimes we have to be honest with ourselves. Is there things that I'm afraid to let go of? And then I have to ask myself, what's more important to me? Holding on to things that are going to keep me going back to what it is I'm trying to leave, or keep me stagnant? Or is it important for me to continue to move on to where it is that I'm trying to go? Maybe I did backslide, I need to get back on track. What's more important? Me standing on my God-given conscience and moving forward into where I'm being led, or me trying to hold on to people, places, and things that are going to set me back? Either those things have already caused me to backslide in, and I'm trying to come out of that, or it's trying to lead me to backslide. Whichever one it is, which one is more worth it? And sometimes we have to be willing to be alone for a season, without the friends, without the family, without the person that we're dating, without those things that we desire, because we have to go forward, So that's basically that. And I hope that this has been helpful because it happens so often in our lives. I know that for myself, I do like adventure. I like to travel. I like to see new things. So I can be very adventurous in some areas. But when it comes to relationships in particular, for example, it can be really challenging for me to let go of people. It can sometimes even be downright devastating to let go of people, whether they want to leave and I'm trying to let them go, or I have to leave, or whatever it is. So for me, I take it extremely hard. And sometimes I find myself holding on to people that don't want to be there anymore, or that I need to let go of. Or maybe it's mutual, right? And I may not be begging and pleading, and I may not be physically, literally trying to hold on to them, and I'm not stalking them and showing up at their house and banging on the door. I'm not doing stuff like that. But even in my mind, like holding on to them in my mind and hoping and wishing that they come back or it works out, or trying to reach out to them, see how they're doing, and maybe I can rekindle stuff. But if it's time to close that door, it's time to close that door. And we have to be honest with ourselves about that. If we really want to move forward and make change, and this is where we're being led to go, we have to be willing to be honest with ourselves and say, I'm not ready to let those things go because I'm afraid of what's ahead. I'm afraid of this new life that I have to live. It may mean, like I said, that you have to be alone for a season. You may have to go somewhere where you don't know nobody. You're not comfortable with that. And you have to be willing to go through those processes in order to be where you need to be. And that can be scary. And this is why a lot of people, I believe, never really reach up to their full God-given potential. They never fully do transform and become the person that they're meant to be, that God wants them to be, because they're not willing to let go of the places, things, and people that are not meant for them anymore. Or it could even be things in their lives, like I said. It could be substances. It could be so many different things that we can use that are holding us back. In some cases, even taking us backwards. And we don't want to let these things go, because to let them go would mean that we have to make a lot of changes in our lives. We have to maybe, like I said, go to a whole different location, or have whole different friends, or a whole different lifestyle. And that's scary. Or maybe we're not really truly ready for that lifestyle and that type of responsibility. We want to just be able to give in to the temptation, because it feels like it's easier to just give in or to just go back. Let me just go back to that job. I haven't been able to find work. I know it's not meant for me to go backwards, but I'm going to go back anyway and do what I need to do. Or let me just go back to those places that I'm comfortable with. I want to have fun. I've been bored. I've been going through a lot of stuff lately. Let me go back. And now you bring yourself backwards into a situation that you were trying to be led out of. So I know that when you're serious, because I've made some changes in my life, and I don't even have the desire for some of those things anymore. Even especially when it comes to like my diet, things that I used to eat, I don't even have a desire for those things anymore. Or maybe once in a blue moon it may come up, but then it's like, it's not even worth it. You know what I mean? Some things, I eliminated completely. Some things I only have once in a blue moon, whatever it may be. But in my mind, it's like, I don't even want meat anymore. I don't even want dairy and eggs. I don't even like the smell of it. Like you get to a point where your life is transformed so much that even just the thought of it turns you off. Not because you feel like you're better than somebody who eats that, or you're better than somebody who doesn't drink or whatever. It's not even so much about that. Because in everything we have to strike to have a sense of humbleness and gratitude. Because we can always slip back. We can always mess up. We're not perfect in and of ourselves, right? But there is a sense of accomplishment to say, thank God for how far I've come, and I'm not going to allow people, places, or things, or even my own self to bring me backwards. I went through too much work to get myself to where I am now. Is it worth going back? Is it worth doing that? So this is a message for me as well, because even though there are some areas that I've been doing very well and I haven't backslid, there are other areas that I have. So this is why I can speak from experience that these are some of the reasons why sometimes we go backwards. And I think that when we're honest with ourselves and we truly start to address some of those loopholes, we will improve going forward. And it can be so scary because I know for me, like I said, I have a hard time, especially when it comes to relationships and people. It's so hard. And then I have my other things like music that's hard for me to let go because it makes me feel good. I like to dance. But if I know that these things are not, the words and the lyrics, it's just not taking me where I need to be spiritually, mentally, emotionally, I keep listening to that. It's not healthy. So I have to be honest with myself and say, you still keep dabbling into this music. You got to be honest with yourself about why you keep doing that and really be serious about going on a journey. Because there was a time when I wasn't listening to that music anymore. And I was very serious about that. But I backslid. And now it's even harder for me to let go of the music than the first time. Because like I mentioned before with the brain, we make these habits and we compact these things in our brains the more and more we keep doing it. Especially when it's something like music. Music is very powerful. So we just have to be really honest with ourselves. So I'm gonna leave it there because I can keep talking, and I hope this has been helpful in your journeys of where you're trying to go and where God is leading you. And I encourage you to stay on the journey. From experience, it's never worth allowing people, places, and things to get you off course and go backwards. Sometimes people can go so backwards sometimes they don't even make it back out, because sometimes it's only by the grace of God that we got out of certain situations, certain traps, right? And then we go back only to be trapped again. Why? God is trying to lead you out of bondage, but you keep wanting to go back to bondage because of the benefits that come with it. But we have to think about that sometimes, and we have to make sure that we are also asking for the desire to want the things that's best for us, not the things that just feel good and remind us of memories or things that everybody else is doing. No, what is it that I need to be desiring that's best for the path that I'm supposed to be on, regardless of what other people are doing, regardless of what the majority are doing, regardless of what I used to do in the past, regardless of what my friends or my family, people around me are doing or saying. What is it that I need to be doing? And I need to be so focused on that I'm not willing to lose that for nobody or for nothing. That's how serious I need to be on that journey. And I always said, if I could really, the way that I'm so stern with my veganism, if I could push that in other areas of my life, I remember my aunt was like, you could do it one day, because with God, all things are possible. And I've overcome some other areas where I don't even have a desire for those things anymore. So I know that if I could do it in those areas, it's going to be challenging to do it, like when it comes to things like I said with the music and stuff like that. Because I love me some music. I love to dance. I love to sing. But I know it's not possible because I did it before, like I said, and I went back. But was I fully transformed? Was I fully surrendered? Because if I was fully surrendered and fully transformed, I wouldn't have had loopholes that would have brought me back. So this is why we have to be honest with ourselves about that. And we have to be careful to not keep going back to the same thing. Because the more we keep going back, the harder it is to get out of that. And like I said, some people don't make it out. So we have to, I don't want to scare people, but we have to be serious as well, because this is our lives. And we don't want to keep getting ensnared, because it's but so much chances. God is a merciful God, but he's not going to keep, bailing you out every single time. There's some times where he may just leave you in there and say, if this is what you want, I'm going to leave you to your own devices. I'm not going to force you to live for me and do the things that I'm calling you to do. If you don't want to do it, I've given you so many chances, you keep going back. But this is what you clearly seem to want. Like I said, you be careful what you ask for, you might get it. You keep wanting that. You keep going back to that person. You keep going back to that place. You keep going back to those things. And eventually you become ensnared to a point where you can't even come out of it. And if you do, you can't come out of it unscathed, because you keep going back to something that God keeps trying to deliver you from. And this is very scary. Some people end up even losing their lives because they keep going back to things, and then they've actually lost their lives. Or now you're entangled with somebody because now you have a child with them. Now, you end up getting into a business deal with somebody, and now all this money is tied up and all this stuff has come out of it, or you in massive amounts of debt. So yeah, you've been able to come out of it, but all these consequences now have come out of that now. And now you're in an even worse situation than you were before, because like I say, you play with fire, you're going to get burned. If you played with fire and you didn't get burned, that's a blessing. And a lot of times we don't see it as a blessing. We see it as, oh, let me go play with the fire again and see what happens this time, since I didn't get burned the first time. And then when we get extremely scalding burns, and now it's, oh my gosh, how did this happen? But you knew that there was a possibility of getting burned, especially when you went back, because you already know, because you went there before. So why go back? because you were attracted to the fire. You were attracted to the suspense of it, and the thrill of it, or the whatever it comes with it. So we have to be very careful. Excuse me. We have to be very careful with that. So take care, y'all, and I hope this has been a beneficial video. And yeah, I'll talk to y'all again soon. Bye.